Hey everybody out there, my name is Dragnix, and one of the sequels to the most infamously difficult series is just around the corner in Dark Souls 3. It's one of the most anticipated games of 2016. Now, some players can't get into the game because of its difficulty, but what about those other players who are looking for a difficult experience but just can't get into the subject matter? Maybe they need a different perspective, like a top-down perspective, or maybe the game needs to be themed about rats. Now, I would question the sanity of the person who asked for that specific game, but that person is in luck. DarkMaus released yesterday on Steam for $9.99, and it's a difficult 2D slow combat game very similar to the combat style of Dark Souls. Does the game have enough varied and difficult combat to keep those Dark Souls players satisfied? That's what I'm here to answer. Let's start with the core of the game, the combat system. You start off with a sword and shield, and have basic actions and a light and strong attack, as well as the ability to block and dodge. The combat here is centered around recognizing your opponent having a weakness in their defense, getting in and hitting them, then making a quick decision to continue the assault or back off in defense. Button mashing won't work here, as you'll drain stamina very quickly, leaving you open to take a ton of damage while you're defenseless. Unlike hack and slash gameplay, this combat is very precision oriented and will punish you hard for a mistake. Combat makes positioning key, as the system recognizes hitboxes very clearly. If your shield is not actually in the way of an attack, for example, you will get hit. In addition, getting behind an enemy, with a few exceptions, will give you a distinct advantage, as you can attempt to force the tempo by hitting them while keeping mobile. For a small indie game, I was really surprised by the level of precision here, and few games of this price can get this right in terms of technical precision. Both the keyboard and the mouse, as well as the 360 controller, work for combat, as it gives you the absolute precision that you need in order to be victorious over your enemies. The lock-on system will cause you problems at first, but once you get a hang of turning it on and off, there are really no problems here. The game adds to its complexity with some different weapons, each with their own strengths, such as being able to pierce shields or crush enemies. There are abilities you can equip, such as a dash attack or additional accessory slots. Now, sometimes switching to the appropriate weapon in the middle of battle is key, and changing your tactics based on the enemies you are facing becomes a necessity. This creates a game where having the combat advantage is key. Luring enemies becomes essential, so you can have the advantage in the reach of your weapon or limiting your opponent's mobility. A lot of times when I was having trouble with a particular section, the solution was using the environment around me, like here where I cause enemies to bottleneck into a small, manageable area. Reflexes in combat are one thing, but being smart ended up making the biggest difference here. That's not to say that being smart will carry you through the game. You'll die. A lot. If you're looking for that soul-crushing difficulty, this game can bring it at times, with how hard the enemies hit and how you can get overrun rather quickly. The game does help you out a bit there though. When you die, you go back to the last campfire that you lit up, aka your save point. Familiar, I know. And a ghost of you will appear there with you. These ghosts can help you in combat, although you really have no control over them. They make certain sections easier, that's for sure, with the fact that you can get the position on enemies thanks to them, or just for the fact that they distract an enemy or two while you figure out exactly what you need to do in certain situations. Look, if I haven't made it clear by now, the combat in DarkMaus is the game's strongest point, and in particular with its challenge. When the comparison to Dark Souls was made in the name, I was a little bit hesitant to take a look at it, because sometimes a game doesn't do well in living up to the namesake of the game it's referring to. I can say that DarkMaus actually did it for me here. There's some enemy variety to take advantage of, and I can say for certain that I cursed at the top of my lungs once or twice during the game. The game threw some variety in terms of traps and layouts as well. Having to worry about spikes or even flamethrowers coming from the walls added to the tension, or gave you a tool to use against your enemies. I do have to give it to the level design here. It always seemed like a good combination of placement of enemies and traps, forcing me into corners and to make hard decisions about where to go next, and it did the job of complementing the combat nicely. The boss fights were pretty great and challenging as well. They required different tactics, or using the clues that the boss gave in his movement patterns or just the shape of his character, and I really appreciated this fight in particular. It showed the highlights of the combat system so well, and while some boss fights may seem easy with a particular strategy, there was still a technical precision needed to execute that strategy. It was a test of what you could come up with in terms of your acquired skills and their combinations, and I appreciated every boss fight that I ran into in this game. Now, in typical RPG fashion, you do have stats that you can level up, such as the amount of stamina you have to throw out attacks and dodges, or even the amount of weight you can carry. You do have to spend points to use certain weapons as well, so you gotta allocate each point you get smartly. And the experience in the game is a currency in of itself, which is spent at the campfires of the game. If you die with some on you, your corpse will keep it there, and you'll respawn at the last campfire, aka checkpoint. Then you'll have one shot, one opportunity to grab it again. But if you die before you get to it, it's gone. Forever. That's only with the experience, however, which is referred to as marrow in this game, as other items will mysteriously make it back to your newly spawned mouse. The game's atmosphere also complements its combat. It's nothing but dark corridors and a very simple aesthetic, but I was surprised on how well it did in complementing the tension the game's combat had going for it. The light effects when looking around corners or discovering a new light source worked rather well, and the minimal use of color made the color that did show up rather striking. Just like a mouse, the game did a great job of getting you into this panic state, running for your life as you try to make it to the next campfire with your hard-earned experience before you get hit by that arrow that is a little bit off-screen. As to music, it fits the sorta dead world theme that the game has going for it, but honestly, it could have used something more. Sound design in general is rather basic in combat, with hit sounds on shields and flames being cast, but it really didn't seem to make a difference when I turned it off. It's one of those situations where the sound doesn't stand out, but it doesn't really enhance things either, it was just there. Now, what doesn't necessarily work for the game is its exploration elements. Now, the game allows you to move from place to place and naturally explore the map, and those determined hunters will find secrets around each and every corner to help in the next fight or two. But you'll get lost in this world rather easily, and the map that you have is awkwardly implemented via the select button on the controller, which doesn't pause the game and has to go through the other options of the abilities and equipment menu. This seems like a game that a mini-map and compass would have made a lot more sense. In addition, objectives aren't necessarily marked, and I found myself getting frustrated as I had no idea where to go next at times, just hoping that going into the unexplored parts of the map would get me where I needed to go. It's easy to miss things, such as the fact that I'm pretty sure I missed a bow and arrow that I needed, which would have made a certain fight a lot easier. And backtracking is a chore in this game, as all the enemies respawn when you hit a campfire, aka checkpoint. One big frustration factor that the game does need to address, in my opinion, is when an event in-game happens for seemingly no reason. For example, here, it was announced that I was being hunted. I still have no idea what that meant. Is an enemy coming for me? What's exactly going on? And at a certain other point, the game halved my health when I respawned, but didn't explain to me why. This led to frustration, as there was a strong disconnect of what was happening in-game and in the world in question. The game doesn't do a great job of teaching you why things were happening after the basic tutorial the game starts off with. There are certain parts of the world that are death traps for no good reason as well, asking for too much precision in terms of movement at times. These spikes in particular is what I'm referring to, because screw these spikes. Now, the game also doesn't have the deep lore that Dark Souls has, as I would have been shocked if it did. Basically, this world only has a couple of sane characters left, as an evil entity keeps on spawning animals and those who have died over and over and over again. It's basically caused mass chaos, turning people bloodthirsty and insane. You really don't know what part you play in the story, and frankly, I still don't know, other than I'm just sorta there. In addition, you really don't get a lot of character interaction, at least in the first 4 hours of gameplay. What's weird here though is that there are city names, and there seems to be a lore here. It's just barely touched on. Now, it's possible I missed some things while playing. There are side elements to explore that may give side missions. For example, I ran across a prison that I could free a fellow mouse from. It hinted that I may have learned more from the world from him as well, but I had a slight problem beating it at this point. The writing that is here though is serviceable, and did intrigue me a tiny bit, but not enough to make me run all over the place looking for everything that I could find. Overall, if you're looking for a challenging combat for a cheap price and are a Dark Souls combat fan, DarkMaus does a pretty kick-ass job of delivering in difficulty and in combat precision. The presentation was what drew me to take a look at the game, but what kept me here was the fighting and how much precision that it had. While some may find it too basic for their tastes, I found it refreshing, as it rewarded players who could use everything to their best advantage and didn't throw cheap tricks at you while doing it. While the game could use improvement in the storytelling and exploration parts of the game, it really doesn't overshadow the game's strengths, and it's worth a recommendation from me. Alright, this is Dragnix signing out. I hope you got an idea of what DarkMaus has to offer. If you have any additional questions for me, leave them in the comment section below, and I will leave my Steam review in the description. If you like this video, hit a like on that Steam review, as well as a like on the video. Thanks for watching, and keep on gaming. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button in the middle of the screen. The last video I did will be in the top left, and a related video to this will be in the top right. I do have a Twitter handle at the bottom left, and a Facebook page at the bottom right. And of course, you can always subscribe to the Google Plus portion. Anyway, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.